Howdy y'all, TheJTJ here with another Soulblight Gravelords Warscroll review. Today I'll be looking at Zombie Dragons and Terrorgheists, so let's get ready to roll. Alright, jumping right into the Zombie Dragon, one of our two big monsters in the book. We have 14 wounds, 14 move at full health, a 4+ save, and 10 bravery. It has a missile weapon, pestilential breath, 9-inch range, 1 attack, 3+ to hit. The wound is under the damage table. Starts at a 2+, -3 rend, D6 damage. So if we come down here to the abilities, when you attack with this model's pestilential breath, roll a dice before making a hit roll for the attack. If the roll is less than or equal to the number of models in the target unit, the attack scores a hit without needing to make a roll. You can sort of circumvent a lot of the negative modifiers with hit rolls with this, like if someone's -1 to hit and shooting or something like that. Basically you get to roll this to see if you auto hit them. Super good ability, especially if you're going up against anything over 6 models. 5 models too is pretty, but even a single model unit is still hit. You could still possibly hit them with a roll of a 1. So basically, if it's 6 models or more, you're all going to auto hit them. If for some reason you're going up against a single model or maybe a 5 model unit and you roll and you fail that roll, you will still get to go ahead and make the normal to hit and wound roll as you would like a normal shooting attack. So the success chance of you actually hitting a unit is pretty good. Pretty good with the pestilential breath. It's -3 rend. That's going to go through a lot, and it's D6 damage, which is a bit swingy, but it's still a D6. It looks nice when you roll a 5 and a 6. All right, we also have the melee weapons: snapping maul, 3-inch range, 3 attacks, 4s, 3s, -2, and D6 damage. Sword-like claws, 2-inch range. Attack is based off the damage table. Starts at 7. 4s, 3s, -1, 2 damage. As far as coming down to the bottom of the Warscroll, you really get fly. You get the pestilential breath ability, and then the keywords: death, Soulblight Gravelords, a monster, and a zombie dragon. All right, coming in at a cost of $2.95. Not the worst cost ever for what it's doing. Could be slightly cheaper, I think, for what you're getting. It does have the monster keyword, and it's battle line if Avangori. So the max wound output is 32. The average wound output is 6. Notice that huge drop from max to average. There's a couple reasons, because it does have D6 for some of its attacks. It does hit on 4s and wounds on 3s. You would look at the rend and go, well, that's pretty good rend. However, the problem is with that, right now a lot of stuff too is just ignoring that first point of rend. It's just sort of not mattering a lot. Average with a +1 to hit is 8, and average with +1 to hit and wound is 11. So if you give it a little buffs, it does start working a little better. And I will say that, it's not the damage output of a Vampire Lord on Zombie Dragon. So that's just something that you need to keep in mind. You have a substantial drop off from that unit. The good, it's a monster keyword. Super important in this edition. It has a ranged attack, which is pretty solid. It's one of the better ranged attacks we have in the book. Its move is 14. Its wound is 14. It's a 4-up save. And I put the 4-up save into good because that's not a horrible save, but then again, it's not a 3+. Works nicely with Amangori and Vanangorian Lords. I think that synergizes well with both of those things. So if you're looking to run those, this might be something you want to fill out with. The bad, the cost is a bit high. I could see that cost coming down a little bit to make me really want to run it or mess with it. 4+ save, no healing on Warscroll. It could die fast, and I mean, I'm just looking at it. A 4+ save that could go to a 3-up with an all-out defense, but still, it's only 14 wounds, and you're relying on other things to heal it. If somebody focus it either with good shooting or good melee, it's gone. D6 damage weapons are a bit swingy. That goes for its shooting and its snapping maul. That's just the way D6 things are. You know, when you're expecting that 5 or 6 and you roll that 1 or 2, then you go, okay, I shouldn't even have brought this thing. But when those 6s hit and you see that 6, you're like, yep, you know, you're putting out 12 and 15 and 18 wounds sometimes with some of those attacks. All right. Add some mobile punch to your army. However, don't run it into the center of the enemy lines. It will melt. Use it on flanks to take out chaff, screen, and weak objective holders. So this is by no means, in my opinion, a hammer unit. This is more of a scalpel. Even though you're looking at it and going, but hey, this is a big monster. Shouldn't I be able to go toe-to-toe with anything or take on big blocks of infantry? I would suggest not, just because of the save. And it being not being able to heal itself. It's not a hero. It's not going to get that healing every turn either. So you want to be careful where you actually use it. If you look at the average damage output, it's very spiky. Without buffs and support, it will probably let you down a few times a game. So, you know, that going back to those D6s, those hits on 4s, those wound on 3, there's going to be times when you're getting only a couple of attacks through. And then if they all out defense, that rend isn't going to matter. You're going to be surprised, like, oh, I only did 3 or 4 damage this turn. That's going to happen a lot. So just keep that in mind. I think it's more of a distraction model than something to build around, even in Avangori with a cursed mutation. So what do I mean in a distraction model? If you're going to put one of these on the table, especially if you're just putting 1 or 2, there's going to be a lot of opponents, especially that newer opponents, that are going to be, oh my goodness, it's a big monster. I'm scared to go run over there and do something to it. They're going to overestimate its killing potential, its survivability. So you can use that to your advantage by placing it in places that, hey, you know, come at me, bro. And they might be scared to, but in reality, they could probably wipe it in 1 turn of combat. That's what I mean about a big distraction piece. You use it to go and do things to the side that isn't sort of the linchpin of what you're really trying to do in the game. It is good in Amangori, but even with the curse mutations, I would look to be putting them on something else anyway. So if you have an extra one, sure. But at the end of the day, I think it's just run it vanilla, put your curse mutations on, Vampire Lord and Zombie Dragons, something better. However, it does synergize nicely with Look of Eye and Vangorian Lord. They make the Zombie Dragon hit better and live longer. You could look to run a Zombie Dragon and Vangorian Lord on a flank to control a side. I do like that combo. Zombie Dragon, Vangorian Lord. You set them off to one side. They're fast enough to threaten things on the side, to come and flank things, to pick and choose their battles, take out chaff, and stay alive. The Vangorian Lord will heal the Zombie Dragon some, and they both buff. So it's a good combo to look at. Unit rating is a C. For 295 points, you get a fast monster with very up and down damage output. If not supported, or if it comes into contact with a strong unit, it will die and give your opponent an extra victory point for killing a monster. Something you have to think about. If you're taking the Zombie Dragon and you're looking at what am I going to use it for and what am I going to do with it, realize that that is a victory point sitting on the table. So if your opponent doesn't have anything to do, they can do a bring it down on it, and they focus it. I don't think it's going to live. So it's something to keep in mind when you're selecting this unit. It could be useful in some builds, but would not build around it. I just don't. I mean, there's a ton of ways to buff these, and we'll talk about that in a bit. But just looking at it as just a Warscroll, I think there's points better spent in other places. However, if you do add one in, I wouldn't call you crazy, because I do think it has a place in pretty much any list if played correctly. Can fill your battle line in Avangori if you want to run a 100% monster list. So if you're just looking at run something fun and cool, I think that's a great idea. Like, talking competitive sense, I don't know how well that will work. It might, but just from a fun sense or running a fluffy list, I think that'd be really fun to see three or four of these guys on the battlefield at a time. All right, moving right along to the Terrorgheist. So we got the same wounds, move, save, and bravery as the Zombie Dragon. The missile weapon does change to Death Shriek. It's got a 10-inch range, it's one attack, and then it has an ability. And do not use his attack sequence for an attack made with this model's death streak. Instead, roll a dice and add the death streak value shown on the model's damage table. If the total is higher than the target unit's bravery characteristic, the target unit suffers a number of mortal wounds equal to the difference between its bravery characteristic and the total. So what's going to happen is you're going to roll some dice, and you're going to go into the death streak table under the damage table and add that number to it. If you beat the enemy bravery, it does mortal wounds to that. It's good and bad. I love those. I love the idea of those attacks, and I think they used to be a little bit better. But you got to remember, probably about half of the armies in the game are 10 bravery. So right there, you're needing to roll a 5 already just to do a mortal wound. Now, there are ways to debuff. There's some debuffs in the book. You know, if you're playing something with a low bravery, it starts becoming really nice because then you can pick out those heroes and just hit them with some mortal wounds. However, it's something that you just have to know you're not going to be able to count on it in a GT or a tournament because you're going to run up a lot of 10 plus bravery armies. Looking at the melee weapons, Fanged Maul. 3-inch range, 3 attacks, 4s, 3s, -2 d6. Skeletal Claws, range is 2, number of attacks is 4 at top profile. 4s and 3s, -1, and d3 damage. So it's a very similar profile to the Zombie Dragon. This one is slightly swingier because you got that d3 damage and the less base attacks on it. This model can fly. We've already talked about Death Streak. Now here's the big one we're coming to is the Gaping Maul. If the unmodified hit rolls for an attack made with a Fanged Maul is 6, that attack inflicts 6 mortal wounds on the target and the attack sequence end. Do not make a wound or a save roll. So your Fanged Maul, you're getting 3 attacks. If you roll that 6 to wound, that's automatically 6 mortal wounds going into a unit. Love it, love it, love it. Any of the old Feck players, you know, that's what you used to live and die by was that. However, the difference is with Flesh Eaters that there's a lot more ways to buff that attack and do that attack multiple times. With here, you're really banking on hitting a 6 out of 3 dice. Of course, if you have a reroll 1s, you know, that's from Nagash or something, that's very helpful. But you're sort of fishing for those 6s, but when they hit, it's beautiful. Finally, Infested. If this model is slain before the model is removed from play, each unit within 3 inches of this model suffers D3 mortal wounds. So that can be nice if you're piled in. There's 3 or 4 units around. You know, just hit them with some D3s. I like the idea of it. I love little fluff rules like that. I don't think that's a game-changing rule at all, but it's nice to have something a little extra. I wish they would have done it with the Zombie Dragon. All right, keywords: Death, Soulblight Gravelords, Monster, and Terrorgheist. All right, coming in at 305 points, it's a monster, which is a great keyword currently, and battle line if Avangori. Looking at the damage, it has a max wound output of 36, an average of 6.5. So once again, we see that big drop off because of the D6 damage, the D3 damage, the 4s to hit, the 3 wounds. There's a huge drop off. The average damage with a +1 to hit is 9, and the average with a +1 to hit and wound is 10. And the other thing to keep in mind when we're looking at this, even at a 2+ save, it's doing pretty good damage in a 3-up save. It's very it's very solid. It doesn't when it spikes, but you're doing a little bit consistent damage because you're factoring in you're going to hit that 6 on the mortal wounds is really on the average when we're looking at just averages on dice rolls. That's why at a 2+ and 3+, you can start counting. Okay, I'm going to count 4 and 5 wounds a turn. At least that's the hope, right? All right, the good. It has a monster keyword, which is good in this edition. Ranged attack is solid, if not swingy, or let's say situational. It's a 14 move, 14 wound, 4-up save. Works nicely with Avangori, Invangorian Lords, and fishing for 6s. It's one of them models you're fishing for 6s. The bad cost is a bit high on it. I think for what you're getting in the package, it could go down some. A 4-up save with no healing on Warscroll could die fast, same as the Zombie Dragon. This is a very, very similar unit to the Zombie Dragon in that regard. Death Streak is a no-go against many armies, so sometimes you're just going to have matchups where you're lucky if you get 1 mortal wound. Thoughts. Fills the same role as a Zombie Dragon. Damage is dependent on those Fang Maul 6s. When they work, they can take out units. When they miss, you'll still have D6 damage to hopefully spike. So, you know, it's not all hope is lost if you don't roll those 6s. It's just beautiful when you do. Death Streak against a 10 Bravery is a low probability. Many armies in the game have a 10 plus Bravery, so keep that in mind. Infested is a nice bonus rule. At least it's something. I just like them little rules like that. Like the Zombie Dragon, pick and choose your battles. It needs support and good matchups. If you try to run the Terrorgheist into the middle of the enemy line, it's going to melt just like a Zombie Dragon. All right, unit rating is a C. I basically copied and pasted this from the Zombie Dragon rating. It's the same thing I can say. It's a fast monster with a very up and down damage output. If not supported or if it comes into contact with a strong unit, it's going to die. Could be useful in some builds, but would not build around this. You can fill out Battle Line and Avangori if you want to run 100% monsters. Once again, I think that is a fun idea. So just know that its uses are going to be very similar to the Zombie Dragon. It just depends on your flavor. Are you more fan of Death Shriek or Pestilence or Breath? Are you more fan of the Fang Maw or the Sword-like Claws on the Zombie Dragon? What do you think's better? All right, let's look at some ways, and this is sort of the combined section because this is sort of interchangeable with both of them. How to buff. Avangori Curse Mutation. I would take Urges of Atrocity or the Null Blood Construct. I think both of them have their uses depending on what you want to do with this monster. The Manfred Vigor of Undeath for +1 to hit and wound. Neferata's Dark Mist, ignore the modifiers, and I think that's a nice one because if you have just one of these and you want to keep it alive because you have a plan for it and you're in Neferata, putting a Dark Mist on it is not a horrible idea. The Lucavi and the Vengorian Lord's Warscroll, if you just sort of read through it, there's probably 2 to 3 things on each one of those Warscrolls that can just be used to buff these guys directly. Volga under a Killing Moon. Great on the Zombie Dragon. How does it interact with the Terrorgheist? Well, core rule says it doesn't. You're going to pick one or the other. So, of course, if you hit that 6, it doesn't. So this isn't, it's not going to rework. However, if you're taking Volga and a Zombie Dragon, that's kind of nice. Radikar Call to the Hunt is +1 to attack profiles. Everybody loves a +1 to your attack profiles, and it runs nicely with him on an edge. So if you want to run Radikar and a Zombie Dragon or Terrorgheist on a flank or as a hammer, it's a great idea. You'll get a couple extra attacks in it. It will bring up that damage output a good bit. Coven Throne, Tactical Insight, +1 to hit, wound, and save. So Coven Throne, but of course, according to how you're building your army, you might be throwing that Coven Throne buff on your unit of Graveguard or your unit of giant 60 block of zombies, whatever you're running. So Coven Throne is just great for anything. And Nagash is rerolling ones to hit and save, always nice. So who's better? I think it all comes down to personal preference. They fill the same role in a list. The Zombie Dragon has a better shooting tag, but the Terrorgheist has more wound potential. I think they should both be used as a fast intimidation unit, keep them on the edges, and make the enemy have a second thought about moving as an unsupported unit near them. They tend to look more scary than they are. My personal pick is the Terrorgheist. I just love the idea of hitting trip 6s one day. I mean, like, guys, I do think the Pestilential Breath is pretty good. But if we're looking at both of them, if you took either or and you said the other one was trash, it wouldn't. I don't think. I think there could be an argument made for either way. I just love the idea of that Fang Maw going off sometimes and decimating a unit or two. Does that ever happen? Probably very rarely, but it has potential. So tell me, which one do you think's better? If you were building a list and you had to include one, which one are you taking and why? Did you agree with my ratings and assessment? How do you buff them? How do you run them? Let me know. And leave that in the comments, guys. So once again, thanks for watching, and y'all be good.